Hello everybody, Formula One seems to have quite a big problem on its hand, and actually the FIA seem to be going against everything that they should be doing to address this issue. So I want to talk to you about it today and get your opinion on what you think the FIA can do to solve what I think the biggest problem in Formula One is. And for me, that is the lack of seats in Formula One, the ratio between the amount of talent that is out there and the seats that are available to the drivers on the grid. And let's not be frank about it, Formula One is an incredibly prestigious sport. Like, the fact that there are only 20 seats available kind of is one of the allures of Formula One. You know that you are getting the absolute best of the best every single time you tune into Formula One because there are so short of seats. But at the same time, there are so many young talents coming through at the moment. You've only got to look at Piastri, Ilott, Pourchaire, even De Vries, who's missed out on a seat for so long now. The likes of Hulkenberg that are still sitting on the sidelines and waiting for a seat to come towards them. The likes of Giovinazzi that miss out on seats because there just isn't space for them on the grid anymore. And it's two factors for me that come into play here. Obviously, the first factor, modern technology and drivers just being fitter than ever before. The longevity of drivers like Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton still at the top, even though he is getting towards 40 years old. Alonso coming back aged 40 and has come back and looks better than ever before. And for 2022, there are actually 6 drivers on the grid that are over the age of 30, and all of them look like they could be there for a very long time still. Like, I don't see Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Sergio Perez slowing down anytime soon. They just look better and better and better with age. And over the years, the sport's become more and more expensive alongside the drivers lasting longer and longer. And this more expensive means that there's more pay drivers coming to the grid as well. The likes of Latifi, Mazepin, who's obviously just gone, Zhou, who's come in to Alfa Romeo this season. Those pay drivers are taking up seats that a lot of us feel should go to those more talented drivers that maybe don't have the financial backing. And the need for that monetary backing is taking away from those more talented drivers being on the grid. But this all means it's insanely difficult for teams to pick up the best talent in the sport and actually bring them through. We've seen the likes of George Russell take 3 years at Williams to actually step up into a team that I think he is more than capable of being in. And that seemed to be that we were going to get a new couple of teams over the next couple of years. Andretti was the one who made a bid for Sauber Alfa Romeo team in 2021, and that actually fell through. And even though that fell through, we then saw Andretti come back with another proposal to join the grid in 2024. And now there's speculation of teams joining the grid in Formula One all of the time. There's lots of teams that always say, you know, they're interested, but then it never really comes to fruition. But this Andretti bid was the most serious I've seen in a very, very long time. And they've even said that they've got the money ready for the entrant fee and seemingly already have the $200+ million that they'd also have to give the other teams to get into Formula One. Andretti have always been interested in getting into Formula One. They have seen it as the next step for them from IndyCar. And obviously Andretti, with the technical changes that are coming to Formula One in 2022, with the cost cap coming in 2021, and that just made it more alluring to them. It makes it more alluring to lots of different companies and teams to want to step into Formula One because now they're aware that the teams around them aren't just going to be this dominant force that they can never ever catch, as well as rules around aero testing that have come in. Appeals to brand new teams getting into Formula One and stepping up to the plate and seeing what they can do. And as you're well aware, the FIA's requirements and seemingly already have an engine deal as well for Andretti set up for the 2024 season. So it seems crazy that their approval seems to be taking so long. And they've actually even said themselves, if they get approval, they're ready to go the next day. So they are incredibly serious about getting this slot in Formula One, actually even saying that they want a Formula 2 and Formula 3 team in the future as well to bring through American talent into Formula One. And that's a really key and crucial thing here because this Andretti bid is incredibly serious, but they're also offering something that Formula One, I think, should jump at the chance at this ability to have an American team that is willing to build and have American drivers coming through into Formula One. And the USA is just expanding in terms of Formula One. Obviously, we've got 2 races this season, Miami being added in 2022, and seemingly there could be a 3rd race in LA or Las Vegas that could be added to the calendar in the future as well. So the USA is just getting bigger and bigger a market for Formula One, and having more Formula One teams that are based out in America and bring through American talent into Formula One seemingly seems like a perfect thing for Formula One to have on the grid. And yet we're still waiting on this Andretti approval. We're still waiting to see whether or not they can actually get onto the grid. And even like Colton Herta seems to be, you know, the guy that they'd bring into Formula One. And I'd absolutely love to see him bring in an Andretti team into Formula One and see what he can do up against these other guys that, you know, he's shown that in IndyCar, he is absolutely sensational. Can he do it now in Formula One? And there's always been space for new teams in the FIA regulations. I was reading through it the other day, and there's actually space for up to 13 different teams on the grid if every single team had 2 cars. So there's a maximum of 26 cars that are allowed on the grid. And then if we wanted 14, 15, 16 teams, it just means that only 13 teams or only 26 cars would actually qualify for the race. So there is an opportunity for Formula One to have an infinite amount of teams and just have the qualifying separate out so that it's slightly different and less teams obviously get through into that final race on Sunday. But the FIA have suddenly come out and said they're currently not looking for any new entrants into Formula One, with Haas being the most recent entry to Formula One in 2016. And since Haas have joined in 2016, obviously we've seen some teams change names. We've seen Alpine and Aston Martin come into the grid very recently, but no new teams have entered the fray. They've only been teams that have taken over and companies that have taken over teams that already existed on the grid. And it just seems strange to me that the FIA are basically pushing away teams like Andretti, the possible Porsche deal that's coming along as well. And for me, I was trying to think about why they might be pushing them away. And honestly, I think the only thing is prize money. I think when it comes to prize money, the prize money structure that Formula One has at the moment is it's set up for 10 teams. So meaning if a new team did join into Formula One, the other 10 teams that are already here would now lose out on a little bit of that revenue. They'd obviously lose out on a little bit of the prize money that is available at the end of every season. And for me, that seems like a very small drawback for these teams. First of all, they're getting paid the $200 million entrant fee by Andretti if they come in. Yes, they're losing out on future earnings in terms of whether they win championships, obviously come 5th instead of 6th and so on like that. But there seems to be so many pros to having Andretti come in. And I've kind of built it into some pros and cons. And I'd love to know your pros and cons of a new team coming into Formula One. Because for me, it just seems like an absolute no-brainer. Like so many talented rookies, as I've said, and no place for them to go. More teams means more social media, more people bringing in fans to Formula One, especially an American team with the American market that it's bringing in. It's more competitive driving. We're going to see better drivers on the grid. And it seems like over the last few years, those pay drivers in particular, the likes of Mazepin last season got lots and lots of criticism for being nowhere near good enough. And I don't think they are anywhere near good enough compared to some of those drivers we could have seen in those seats. And just having more talent on the grid means more storylines, more competitive driving, and a better overall race atmosphere, and a better overall season in Formula One. And also, Formula One has set up the grid to be as appealing to new teams as possible. They've put in these budget caps. They've put in the wind tunnel testing. They've put in the fact that you have to pay an entrant fee and that you are basically condemning yourself to being in Formula One for a little while. So we're unlikely to see, those Lotuses or Virgins or HRTs again, where they stick around for a couple of years and then just completely blow up in their own faces and disappear off the face of the earth. The only cons that I can see are monetarily for the teams. Obviously, the 10 teams on the grid probably don't want a new entrant. It makes it slightly more difficult for them. It means there's new competition. It means they'll lose out on a little bit more of that prize money. It moves away from the American franchise model that Formula One is kind of going for. I think they're trying to build this 10-team grid as like a selling point of Formula One and build these teams as, rather than being teams that are going to continually change name and continually change ownership like we do see in Formula One quite often, I think they want to try and build it so that these teams are the teams forever. And you see almost like an NFL, NBA style to Formula One where these franchises and sustainable teams are around for the very, very long run. And obviously, new teams often don't last very long. As I said, Lotus, HRT, Virgin, we've seen them come in, be incredibly uncompetitive. They all came in 2010. None of them exist now. And that is not what Formula One wants. Formula One wants those teams to be in it for the long run. But overall, I think I'd just love to see an Andretti on the track, and I'd love to see Andretti bring in those drivers, possibly give the likes of Piastri, Ilott, Porsche, and of course Herta a chance in Formula One and a chance to show what they are really made of. But that's just my take on what I think is the biggest problem in Formula One, and the fact that the FIA seemingly are actually fighting back against new teams joining the grid, even though there are teams ready and raring to join. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Would you like to see Andretti on the grid? How many teams would you like to see on the grid? And which teams would you like to see join Formula One in the future? I just think it's a no-brainer for me, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Whilst you're down there, leave a like, subscribe to the channel as well. There's lots of new stuff coming up. Obviously, the brand new season in less than 2 weeks' time, and oh my goodness me, I'm gearing up for a wonderful 2022. I hope you'll be there, and I'll see you next time.